couple more people to come in who are just making themselves a drink. But thank you all ever so much for coming. It's lovely to see so many of you here. There's a couple of seats at the front here, guys, and a couple here right in front of me. It's lovely to see so many of you come this afternoon, and welcome. And also welcome to really quite a significant number of people joining us online, which is really lovely, by the webcast. It's part of our commitment to make sure that our centre events are as accessible as possible for people who either physically or financially or for time reasons can't make it to the centre. So this is a bit of an experiment. We'll see how it goes. For those of you that haven't met, I'm Anne Grant, and I'm the lead for Engaged Research and Public Engagement for the Wellcome Centre for Cultures and Environments of Health. Come in, there's a seat on the front. Lady comes. There's another seat at the front here. Yeah. Can I also introduce Jill Baker, who's the centre manager, and you'll be hearing from later, and busily operating the webcast, but can probably wave a hand, Lucy Hodges, who's the centre administrator. And we're going to be running this workshop this afternoon. I apologise if you were hoping to meet a mentor, but for all kinds of reasons, our colleagues are extremely busy at the moment. But we can pass on any questions or any thoughts. I should say that although we're going to be kind of talking for the first half an hour or so, I am very open to being interrupted. So don't feel you have to hesitate if you want to. If I say something that's confusing, just shout out and I'll pause and we'll answer it then, rather than kind of have formal questions. People online, you can ask your questions by typing and Lucy will throw them into the conversation. Or actually people online, if any of you happen to have a microphone and want to experiment with speaking, we'd like to have a bash at that as well, so fingers crossed. How we're going to run this afternoon is, first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the centre's vision, and we think that's important because the reason for having these small pockets of funding and opening them up to the widest possible audience is because this is one of the ways in which we hope to move the centre's vision forward. These little projects, these small research activities are really important in terms of the centre's vision. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes. Come in, Lisa. So seats at the front. It's really important. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about the centre's vision. That's also important for you, of course, in terms of thinking about your application, because if your application helps us fulfil the centre's vision, we will smile at it more nicely. Then Jill's going to talk a little bit about finance and administration for your projects, both in terms of costing and in how it works out, how you get the money in your back pocket, basically. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about engaged research, because that is also core to the centre's vision. And as the lead for engaged research, I ought to be the person who knows how to talk about it. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the assessment criteria for the projects, because again, obviously, if you know how we're going to be assessing these applications, it helps you when you're putting together your form. Then we thought we'd challenge you to have a go at assessing some projects yourselves. And I'm going to split you up into small groups. Do come in. I've got a seat at the front here. And have a look at some of last year's applications and assess them according to the criteria. Give you a bit of a challenge. Then we'll have some time at the end for questions and comments and thoughts and anything that you might have. So I hope all that makes sense. So first of all, the centre's vision. As I'm sure many of you will have already looked at the centre's website, you'll know that the centre's vision is explained there under research themes. But we're dedicated to thinking about innovative approaches to enabling health and well-being across the life course. So that's one really important thing that we're looking at is innovation. To creating and sustaining those environments and cultures that will do that, will sustain. Broadly, we want to help create healthy publics in all sorts of different ways. You might have come across a recent paper which members of the centre published, which was all about this vision of healthy publics. And if you haven't, you will find it under the research drop-down, under centre publications.
On our website.
On our website, yeah. This is the centre's website. So look on there and you'll find under research, centre publications. And that really expresses the centre's commitment towards healthy publics. So how are we thinking, how are we planning to do that? Well, we have 4 broad themes. And we ask that your proposed activity in some way addresses one or more of these themes. And I can usually do 3 of them, and I always forget the 4th. So it's transforming health across the life course in some way. Transforming institutions, and we draw institutions very broadly, not just institutions as in the sense of the university, but also institutions in the sense of social institutions, marriage, family, things like that. Transforming relations and transforming engaged research. So in some way, we ask that your proposed activity fits underneath those. But our focus is on cultures and environments, and on how cultural norms and values and ideas shape our health, but more importantly, can be mobilized to help produce that health. Something else we're also very focused on is transdisciplinarity. We have 12 PIs in the centre, and they genuinely come from 12 different research areas. And sometimes it's like trying to get 12 toddlers to go through a door at the same time. The herding cats approach. But the reason that we have those 12 is because we are genuinely committed to the idea that bringing together people with different backgrounds, different ideas, different thoughts, different ways of doing things helps us do our research better. So we have, I can never remember all of them, but we've got people from the medical school, politics, geography, philosophy, social sciences, law. We cover the waterfront, literature, arts. We have all sorts of things. So we would like your proposals to be transdisciplinary, and that means a little bit more than interdisciplinary. Interdisciplinary is very valuable. Don't get me wrong. But broadly speaking, that's about taking an idea from here and an idea from here and an idea from here, using a method from here, a thought from here. Transdisciplinary is subtly different. It's about finding those spaces in between, carving out those new spaces where no one has been before. So that as part of the innovativeness is to find that new space. What is it that your proposal wants to do that is completely different to anything that's gone before? I think right there, just there. And as mentioned earlier, we're very committed to the idea of engaged research, and I'll come back to engaged research later on to explain that a bit more. But broadly, we're thinking about collaborative, co-created, and collective in terms of our research. And last but not least, we have a remit from the Wellcome Trust to take risks and to be edgy. And that's part of why you're here, because these small pots of money allow us to take those risks and to dare to be a bit different and to do things differently. So that's what we want you to do for us, is to go out on the edge. Yes, it might not fail. It might fail. It might not be quite as successful as you'd like it to be. But actually, we can learn from that. And that's really important. We want to learn from failure as well as success. And we also have a remit, although many of you are local, to think nationally and internationally. So if you can make those connections through your projects, through your proposals, nationally and internationally, that would be amazing. Or even if you can't do it in this proposal, if you can think of a way that something might come out of your proposal that could take that international and national step, that would be good. Okay, I think that's about me on the vision. Anything you want to throw back at me at this point? Any questions, thoughts, comments? Well, you don't know me well enough to shout at me yet, but you will. So I'll hand over to Jill to talk about finance.
Welcome everyone. Hopefully Anne sent through to you some guidance on the finance, but just to reiterate the key aspects of that the funding that we've got has come to the Wellcome Centre from the Wellcome Trust, and Wellcome Trust is a charity. So when they've given us the money, it's what they call for the direct costs, not for any of the overheads of running this university or for the salaries of the professors that work within the centre. And so by kind of giving chunks of this to other people, we need to stick by those principles, that this is money to pay for things that cannot be done using existing resources. So if any of you are wanting to work on the project and you are actually salaried, and if you didn't do this project, you would still have a salary, then you cannot be costed in. What you can do is you can get someone to backfill you. So you were saying, well, I've got a job, but I want to take some time out of that job to do this project, and then we will need to employ a temp to do my job. Then that becomes an eligible cost. You're paying for the temp, not for your time. And so if things are costed in that way, then basically it will go through the auditors fine. So I just want to make sure that when you're thinking about what costs, just think about, if you have a substantive contract, you cannot be charged in. But if you are paid on a project basis, or you want to employ someone new, then that's great. Also, if what you need in your project is a researcher with some academic expertise, you come from a community setting and you want an academic researcher to work with you, you can cost that in, and we can employ someone through the university temporary bank to provide research skills for your study. Or you can yourself become part of our bank and work on a project. Does that make sense? Also,
Sorry, I'm just slightly confused. I might have been a bit stupid there, but when you said substantive contract, it means specifically with Exeter University already.
With anybody.
Any shape or form of industry or profession or anything.
Yes.
Okay.
So
If someone had a part-time job, say?
So if you have a part-time job, that's fine. But if you're already paid for a kind of a full-time job, and then you're doing this, then you're already paid.
Do you classify as full-time job?
Well, I think basically it would have to be counted as a second job. So you would be taxed as a second job if you took this on. So if you were employed, for example, as a nurse for 30 hours a week and you have a spare day, you would join up to the university staff bank to work a day a week with the university. Does that make sense?
What about self-employed?
So if you're self-employed, so basically there are three ways in which we can process the money. So if you're self-employed and you can fill in a self-employment declaration form, which basically says you're taking responsibility for your tax, then we can pay you as a self-employed consultant. Or if you work for a company, that company can charge us for your time. What I've said in the guidance is that what we would like is that the sums of money to be comparable with if we employ people through the university. There are some businesses who pay much higher rates than the university. What we would try to do is try and kind of have some kind of equity as much as possible. But if you've got particular questions, come and ask me. I think some of these are quite sensitive to kind of talk about in an open forum. But if you want to come and talk to me about specific examples and what you think, I can basically, you say, well, this is what I want to claim, and I can go through and go, yes, that would be fine. I would be able to justify that to the Wellcome Trust.
There's a question.
What about collaborators?
Sorry, Jill, we've had a question from
Just when you go to answer the question, can you repeat the essence of the question, because it's not clear on the webinar what the question is.
Okay. Do you want me to redo that previous question? So we've had a question about self-employment.
Yeah.
So the answer to self-employment is yes, you can be self-employed if you can provide us with a declaration that you're paying your own tax, then the university can pay an invoice to you.
Yeah. And substantive full-time posts was the first question. If you're employed full-time somewhere else, then this would need to be considered as a second job and you would be employed and taxed accordingly.
Yes. Collaborators.
Yeah, collaborators. How do we deal with collaborators and their constraints? Thinking about schools and teachers and teacher time.
Again, this is a tricky thing. So if a teacher,
Hang on, the question was about collaborators. How do we account for school time and teacher time and teachers' salaries, for example?
yeah, I think this is one of the things that would be very tricky, because they would say, well, the teacher is employed full time, and if the school wants to be involved in the project, they need to release. If they need to employ a supply teacher in order to release the person to work on the project, then they must claim for the supply teacher time.
Okay. It's quite a lot of organisation, I would presume, to get the school kids to do that, or not?
Either they give it, basically, if they're giving you the time in kind, then it's in kind and we're not going to pay for it. Or if they do want to pay for it, they need to, yeah, we can't just be giving organisations that already paid some other way this money, because it's charity money, and we have to be quite strong in justifying why. Any other questions?
Yes, and other collaborators, like, for example, self-employed artists, to work, say, with me.
Well, I say there's the two options for self-employed. They can be, if they want to maintain their self-employed status and send an invoice for their time, as I say, at the kind of rates that I suggest in the document, then that's fine. They can do that, but they need to prove that they are paying their own tax, and we can basically give them, not do the PAYE for them, or they have the choice of joining up to our staff bank, and we can pay them through the bank on an hourly rate.
So in other words, they wouldn't have to send their invoice to me.
No, they send it straight to us. Yeah. Any other?
Just on that same question, can we employ a self-employed artist on the basis of consultancy fee rather than per hour, because per hour doesn't really make any sense?
So the question is, can we pay on a set fee or per hour? Yes, you can pay on a set fee if that is considered to be kind of reasonable and commensurate with cost. So the university has expectations of what it pays artists per hour. And so, yeah, we can have a discussion about what is the normal range for that, and just make sure that things within, acceptable ranges. We probably couldn't afford Tracy Emin. Any other questions? The other thing that I'd like to say, not about finance, but about administration, you're all welcome to come and have a look around the centre upstairs later. The space is there for you to use. If, as part of your planning for this application, you want to meet with your collaborators in the centre, please let me know, and I'll let you know if there's the space. It's quite quiet over the summer, so we should have some space. Also, if you want to sit and kind of sit quietly at one of our desks, we can give you a kind of a guest log on that allows you to get onto the internet here, work and have those meetings, or to plug your own laptops into our system. We are improving the system at the university to make it easier for collaborators to work with us, and we will have a system where we can give people a more kind of an associate access account, but we're still working through that, and I don't have the IT ability to give you all logins this week, but hopefully if you're successful in your project, we will be able to make you kind of essentially honorary members of the university and be able to access our library and IT services later in the year.
Lovely, thanks, Jill. And I should say, when it comes to costing, people from outside the university, you will need to have your budget approved by Jill once before your application goes in. So I'd encourage you to contact Jill as soon as you can when you're starting to put your application together, talking through with your mentor, and she will be able to advise on what's in and what's out and what's right and what's wrong. We have a kind of central email address, welcome centre, all one word, at exeter.ac.uk. If you address any queries, any finance queries to that email address, it will reach either Jill or Lucy, and they will be able to respond to you. People within the university, you can do your costings through the normal college channels, and they will, if there's any queries, they'll come to Jill and Lucy anyway, so just take the usual route. Okay, now engaged research. I introduced myself as the lead for engaged research, and I mentioned a couple of times that this is quite central to the moving forward of the centre's vision. So I wanted to just take a few minutes to talk about that. And if you haven't discovered it already, we have a centre engagement implementation strategy, which again is on our website, and you will find under the engaged research drop-down. When if you go there, it talks about the vision of engaged research, and one of the little drop-down jobbies inside that page has that attached to it. There's a lot of people talk about the need to engage. Politicians talk about it all the time. The need to engage with people, the need to get people engaged, and but we're going a little bit beyond there in the centre. I don't want to give you a potted history of science communication or research communication, but we are moving. At one stage, it was kind of what's sometimes called sage on the stage. Someone doing what I'm doing, basically, standing here and telling you things, because I am very important and I know lots of things, and you don't. We've gone beyond there. We've gone beyond coming in to have a conversation and talking about our research. We like to think of ourselves as moving on to the next step and saying what we want to do is to bring people together in an engaged way throughout the research process, starting from where people are, rather than from where we are as researchers. So researchers and people from outside the university really working together throughout the research process. Indeed, from before the beginning, if you like, because quite often what we need to know is, what are the questions? What matters to you? Where are you right now? That can be quite an important pre-question to ask. So from understanding, from developing that kind of understanding and expressing the nature of the problem, to creating a question, to doing the research together in some way, to delivering the research, and to thinking about an outcome or an output that is beneficial. And we understand that outcomes and outputs may be different for the different partners in a project. So it doesn't have to be one gloriously beneficial outcome. It could be different for different partners. And I'm not saying that your proposals have to be all of those things, because I can see you sitting there thinking, really, you want me to do all that in 6 months? Not happening. Of course it won't. It can be any stage up to and including any of those bits. So it might be that you just need to spend some time thinking about what that question might be, working with a community to work out what that question might be. So you put in a proposal around there. It might be that you already have worked with a community and you have an idea of what a question might be, and you need to take that next step. So it's about being somewhere along that process, working collaboratively with different communities to make the research happen. And this is our vision, because we think that fundamentally will lead to better research. If research is about making a difference, then the people that need to be most intimately involved in that process are the people with first-hand experience of the issues. And lovely and delightful as we in the centre are, we don't have first-hand experience of everything. And so these projects are about working with a range of different communities in order to make that happen. And one of the things that's really pleased me this time with this call for research support funding is that about half of the expressions of interest came from groups and organisations outside the university. And that pleased me no end, because it means that we're starting to get our message across. about what we're about. So as I say, we don't expect you to cover the whole of engaged research. That would not be possible. But we do ask that your proposals are somewhere along those lines and are working towards that development. And within this delightful document that I mentioned you can get from the website, we have a description of what we believe to be engaged research. So it might be, if you're a bit unsure, it might be a good idea to go and have a look at that and find out. And I call it a description deliberately, because to define is to close off the possibility of change. So we deliberately call it a description, because we'll constantly be revisiting this as we have activity, as we have research happening, and as we learn from that research, from the outputs of that research, we'll be changing our description and our understanding. So what you do will change what I believe. Please, I'd like that. So yeah, as I say, it can be something that is working towards. It doesn't have to actually be a full-scale engaged research. Any comments on that? Anything coming from the webcast, Lucy?
No questions at the moment. I think everything's fine. I've just been checking the centre email and we've got a couple of people who are having trouble getting in, so I'm just trying to bring them in.
What, physically or?
Well, I'm magic.
Spiritually.
I'm magic, I'm not that magic. Virtually. is the answer to that.
Any other thoughts? Oh, yeah. Right, I'll do that.
I'm trying to imagine where I fit on this kind of dichotomy that you've got of researchers in the university and then everyone else outside, and I don't really feel that I fit in either camp. And so, it's sort of a question of who's engaging with who and what do, it's more of a spectrum.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So the question was about, I'm unnecessarily making a dichotomy between researchers in the university and lovely people outside the university. And that is, as you quite rightly point out, Nicola, completely untrue. It is very much a spectrum. That it's about bringing together with people with different skills and different expertise and different qualities. And yes, I might come with the skill and the expertise to help you formulate a strong research question. But somebody will come with the skills and expertise from having lived with a particular condition or lived in a particular place or whatever. So you're absolutely right to pull me up on that. It is about a spectrum. And it's about the bringing together of skills and expertise rather than the we are here and you are here, the way in which I was saying it. Yes, thank you.
You talked about community.
Yep.
And I think you kind of indicated that was people with first-hand experience of an issue. But we might potentially be working with a whole range of different people who may not necessarily have first-hand experience. They might have a more professional contact. So do you want to give a bit more detail on how you understand community in this context?
It's one of those, the question was around what we mean by community. And it's a good question. And it's one of those spaces in which that description that I just told you about needs to be worked on. Because we haven't yet, within the centre, within the members of the centre even, settled on a mutually agreed description of what we mean by community. So we are very open to all sorts of interpretations of what a community might be. It's even down to like the use of words. In my field, which is engaged research, we often talk about publics, and to get over the sense that there isn't one massive general public out there. But sometimes that word publics is not easily understood, so instead we talk about communities, as in groups of people, and sometimes we talk about groups. So I think what I'd say is a community is whatever it needs to be for your proposal. So it might be that your community includes people with professional expertise of something. I mean, we had one application last time which included GPs and members of a specific working group. And that was fine because they both brought different skills and expertise to the party. So it very much depends on what your proposal needs it to be. And equally, we recognise that the community that you need might not exist yet. And what your proposal needs to be about is bringing that community together, is creating that community, is allowing it to come into being. So it might be an existing community, or it might be a community that needs to be made to needs to be helped to happen. So yes, is the answer. It can be what it needs to be. And one of the, as I say, we're very open to having our description changed and nuanced by the work that's done in these projects. So if yours is trying to do that, you know, more power to its elbow. Any other thoughts? Okay. So what we'll move on to now is the assessment criteria. So I don't think I've done enough, because I was going by how many people were on the list, and I think we've got a few extras, but hopefully we've also got a few people who didn't turn up. So I've got some copies of the assessment criteria here, and if there's enough, you're very welcome to take one away with you. Can I
Have you to pass it through on the shared drive by any chance?
No, it's still on my computer.
Oh, you can just quickly email it to me and then I can try and hand it out to the...
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll email it to you when we break.
Okay,
For
brilliant.
people on the web. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I promise you that when we've done this, we'll have a little break and everybody can have a wiggle and a jiggle and try and get some fresh air. I don't know what it's like online, but it's steaming hot here. Okay, so this is about the assessment criteria that we're going to be using to judge these applications. As Lucy and I have just been having a little chat about, we will send these out by email after the event. So if you don't get one now, you will get one quite shortly.
Along with a recording, there will be a recording of this session available after today. So if you want to revisit anything that's been talked about, we'll make it available for download or for viewing probably on YouTube online.
Yeah.
Our apologies to those of you via webinar. I didn't realise there were handouts, so I didn't get digital copies. Anne has surprised me, so we will get those to you in the break if we can, and if not, certainly by the end of today.
Yeah. Okay. So these are the criteria by which the members of the centre will be assessing your proposals. And I want to say at this point that whenever I say the project should be about, I mean, or can be leading towards X, Y, or Z. As I mentioned earlier, we don't expect to be right the way across engaged research, but leading towards. So, what is it? The first question we'll be asking is it research? And this is something that even in the centre we had a bit of an argument about last time, but we've learned from. So it's really important that this in some way is answering a question, or leading towards answering a question, or leading towards creating a question. So is it research? There has to be, you have to articulate really where your proposal sits in that process. And what point you're doing something and what you and how it will move on to research. So if, for example, your proposal is to gather a group of people who live in a particular neighbourhood to think about what it is they need to improve about their neighbourhood, then obviously you're right at the very beginning of engaged research. So tell us that and where you expect it to come. If we expect this could be a neighbourhood festival at the next summer or something like that. The kind of how it will move you on. So rather than it's not so much about an intervention. We want to do X. We want to do this thing, but more about a process. Research is something that needs to have a question, needs to think, but equally needs to think about the lessons that can be learned. What will come back out of this process that can be built on and learned from further down the line? And something that might be of use to others. It doesn't have to be massive, but it does have to be there. So, you need to think about the context in which you're placing this question and how it might produce knowledge or produce change. So having established that it's research, the next thing to think about is it novel? What are you doing that's different? And it might be that you are inventing a whole new method. Fabulous, that's brilliant. But it might be that you are using a traditional method in a new way or with a new community. So that in some way novel is important. You need to think about collaborators. We've talked about engaged research being collaborative and co-creative. So have you got the right people in your proposal? As Jill mentioned earlier, sometimes one of the questions that came up last time is, could we have a bit of research expertise? So is there some way that you could work, get some research expertise in your proposal if you need it? That's something you can talk about with your mentors, where you need this, maybe if you need it. And as Nicola quite rightly pointed out, you might already have that expertise. So don't be afraid to say, actually, we know how to do what we need to do. Thank you very much. We have the expertise that we need. We have the right collaborators. Obviously, it needs to complement and extend the centre's themes in some way. And if you need to look, there they are. Transdisciplinary, I mentioned that earlier. Engaged research, obviously. Now, and the next, does it have a strong research question, and are the methods appropriate? And that has to have a kind of brackets afterwards for if appropriate, because it might be that you are at the point where you haven't got any methods yet. So you might be at that stage in the process where you're pulling something together. So rather than trying to investigate through doing a series of interviews with X, you're building up that question. So that's about it. Yes, please.
How do you know which methods are appropriate or not?
Well, that's something to talk with your mentor about. So once you've got the idea and you're saying what we want to do is think about this, he or she will then be able to say, well, have you thought about using this kind of route?
It's more like achievable.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Achievable, suitable, appropriate, yes. If you think, I want to do an online survey, and your mentor might say, well, actually, everybody in the people you want to talk to is under 12, so they shouldn't be doing online surveys anyway. That kind of appropriateness. We need to have some sense in your proposal of what's going to come next. This is research support funding, remember. So what's it going to support? Where's the next step going to be? And that might be, well, we're gathering together some data so that we can put in a really big application to the Wellcome Trust or the Arts Council or the big lottery. That's a route out, if you like. Or it might be, we're going to build this and then we're going to step back and think about whether this is a really good question before we make our next step. So some kind of route out is really helpful. And what's I looking at? Yes. We will ask you to produce a report, of those successful projects. But that doesn't have to be written. It could be whatever's suitable for your proposal. So it might be a short film, for example. We've got a project, I won't talk about that. I'll talk about that later. It might be a piece of music, for example. It can be whatever is suitable for the project. It might be an event. And last but not least, does it show good value for money? And that's not, is it as cheap as possible? But is this proposal achievable for the money that you have asked for? Is that balance there? We're not about taking the cheapest bid. We're about saying, will this work? Is it realistic? Can they do what they said they're going to do on the money that they've asked for and in the time that they have? And one thing, the decision when we come to it is discursive. Although this thing has a kind of a gut feeling score, that isn't what we go on. We don't automatically take the top 5 highest scoring projects. We spend time thinking about the projects. Sometimes, last time we took on a couple of projects that actually needed a bit of development, but fundamentally they were really good ideas. And we felt we could support those people to go take that next step. So although, as I say, there is a scoring mechanism, we do take quite a long time in developing and discussing our ideas. So the decision will be discursive, it won't be done on the scores. It might be way up here, it may be way down, but if it's a good idea and something really exciting, then that's something that we'll try and support if we possibly can. That's kind of, I've got a lot of kind of, oh my God, faces looking at me now.
What if you say, if we possibly can, I mean,
well,
what does
sometimes,
that mean for all of us in the room? I mean,
well, it means that
people
this is
great
very
ideas.
this is very competitive. We had 55 expressions of interest, and not all of those will come to full application, but that's about twice as many as we had last time. So we're not going to be able to fund all of them, much as we might like to. It's going to be 4, 5-ish. So it's highly competitive.
4 or 5, so
Ish.
one out of 10.
Well, we've got an idea of the amount of money we want to give out, and so we might within that. It's how much we can afford to do within that. So but it is about the idea. When I say if we can support, it might be that we feel it's a great idea, but we don't have the skills to support it, or the understanding or the knowledge to support it, in which case we will do the best we can to help you onto another funding scheme, to point you in the right direction. So, and your mentor will be involved.
Does that mean there will be like a feedback or a follow-up conversation?
Absolutely, yes, we did that last time, yes. We both gave feedback on where applications, we felt needed to be approved, and other routes that we felt you could use. So yes, absolutely. Anything coming in, Lucy?
No.
I've stunned them into silence.
No, there were a couple of questions, but I think we've covered them.
Cool.
So yes, just repeat the question before you answer it. Sorry, please. Thank you.
Tried to remember to do that. I might not have done it.
I might just start shouting question at you.
Yes, I think you probably should. Okay. I should say. More or less, yeah.
I think that's so very ambitious.
It was.
You did
We
narrow it
did
down.
that. We narrowed it down.
That's not what we wouldn't fund it in the way.
I should say we had,
That's what it is.
we did have a, that's why I said earlier. So the question was about over ambition, for those of you that didn't quite hear it. And I should say that we took a lot longer than you had to decide. It was a long discussion that we had back in January. And yes, we did have to go back to some and say, you're being a little over ambitious, you think you've got 6 months to do this in, you need to cut that down, you need to focus in on one question, you're trying to do too much. That brings me back to the kind of, question we had earlier about the level of support, about being realistic and about value for money, sometimes being not about the cheapest bid, but about the achievable bid within the time allowed. How did you find that?
Can I ask
Yes,
a
of course.
question about 3? Could you say a little bit about how you felt that had engaged research?
So to repeat it, how it was engaged. I should take a step on this and say that back in January, we weren't quite as together on what our vision of engaged research was as we are now, because I've been in post about 3 weeks at that point. A little longer maybe, but we weren't quite as together. I think because they identified the communities they needed to work with, that they needed to go and not just talk amongst the academic community about what evaluation meant, but what that meant to organisations in the real world as well. And they were planning to develop their materials in collaboration with a selection of other organisations, yes.
But this is a typical welcome trust application, and I don't see it in the way that you presented your vision this morning. This is this is very academic. It's very much like what the Welcome Trust would fund for 3 years, but not what you would see of something like this, the experimental, risky, daring.
So it's about the typicality of it. And yes, And this is why I said that, every time we go through this process and that we have successful proposals, they change a little bit our vision of what we mean and what we understand by engaged research, and we want that to happen. So, no project is perfect, and we want that to change. We want to be challenged about what we mean every time. Sorry, Lucy, you don't have. You may go. Yes.
Yeah, I have an online question for you. One of our participants has asked, you've set a 6-month limit on the project. Are there examples of reasons as to why you would accept a project with a longer timeline?
Good reasons, yes.
Mm.
So that's kind of if there is a compelling reason why it needs to take a little bit longer, say it needs to, pulling one off the top of my head, go through a school academic year.
Yeah.
Then we would, but it would have to be a really compelling reason.
And we would, I think, from our funding point of view, this is with my finance.
Well, I was just going to look at Jill and say,
because we're running repeated rounds, we need our projects to finish so that we have reports, and we have an annual report to the Wellcome Trust that we have to make. So generally 6 months is
about right.
Yeah. Jill, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to reiterate that. So often it just depends when it falls. So our annual reports are always the end of January. So actually these ones, they're not going to be finished by the end of January. So if they're a bit longer, it matters less in terms of our reporting. What we want to be able to do is report annually that this funding is making a difference. And that is actually, but also, if what we want these projects to do is to move into future projects and apply for funding. And so, yeah, we don't want them to kind of go on for ages and not get onto the next stage.
Yes. So Jill was just reiterating that we have to time these in with the telling of our story to our wider community, to our funders in particular. So yeah, it's just fitting in with our time slots. And as Jill says, so I'm repeating this for the benefit of our web colleagues, that's part of the reason why we say 6 months, but also because we want to think of this as supporting future research. And that's about the right length of time to be starting to think, as opposed to long-term thinking.
Yeah, one thing we were saying as a table was about the actual form itself,
Mm-hmm.
and wondering, other than the budget, is there much more? Because I feel like a lot of space to talk about quite a complex project.
The form, there was a question about the complexity of the form itself. These ones you've seen here are a bit squished. I took some stuff out. So the actual form itself, which you should have had a copy of, broadly speaking, it's 2 pages for the project. And then there's a section on engaged research, a section on your aims and objectives, a section on your route on. So you're probably looking at kind of 4 or 5 pages altogether, and CVs of project members. There's reasonable room, but in a sense, this is a relative, because it's a relatively short project, we don't want you to go into reams of complexity. We want to focus on the idea. So by constraining you into those 2 pages, we're hopefully making it easier for you. And I understand sometimes it's quite difficult to distill a complex idea down, but it's about saying, what is it that I want to do? What's the question I want to ask, and why do I want to do it this way? So yes, we are constraining you, but we hope for good reasons.
Can I ask you a little bit more on transdisciplinarity? And exactly what you mean by it, and perhaps in relation to the projects that got funded. So I didn't have time to read them all in detail, but I don't think they explicitly said this is transdisciplinary because it's blah blah blah.
Some did.
Some did.
But
so
not
as
it happens.
Of how much do you want us to be explicit about that, and what should we understand by that?
So the questions around transdisciplinarity. Put it this way, the more explicit you can be, the easier it will be for us. So it's about signposting, really, and about saying, we believe this is transdisciplinary because. That doesn't really help,
yeah.
does it?
Well, so
you now need to go on.
An example of how one of these were transdisciplinary.
4 is transdiscipline, is the classic, is the trans. Well, because it's, it's taking part, it's first of all, it's in a new space. It doesn't say,
It doesn't really cite any literature for it, so it's confusing.
cites the,
Any literature at all?
no, but that's fine.
Okay.
We didn't ask you to cite literature.
Right.
Yes, citing literature is not a requirement for the people
That's
online.
new to me, but.
So it's a new space.
It's a new space, but it's with an easily overlooked community. It's taking a new method that hasn't been used very much with that community, and it's bringing people from different places with different kinds of expertise. So they've got physical people in the Fab Lab, they've got, the people who make things, not physical people. They've got people in the Fab Lab, they've got the young people from a different place from the college, they've got a researcher, they've got an organisation, so they really kind of looked in the spaces between, which is what I understand transdisciplinarity to mean, to go beyond and between.
From interdisciplinary.
It's quite different from
those
interdisciplinary.
words are quite confusing.
Yeah, it's about going beyond and between rather than trying to tie a knot of several different things. Okay, I have planned in some time for questions, but I just thought it might be quite useful for you to take a moment now and just think that maybe in the group that you're in, or if you come with a colleague, how what you've just done, thought through, and worked through with these examples might affect your own proposal and what you're thinking about now. So just take a minute or two to think about that, and then we'll come back and have any final questions that you might have.
Oh, I just don't understand what any of
There's a bar of chocolate in my desk that is cold. Okay, Jill, can I borrow you a second? Right, so we've got about another 5 minutes or 5-10 minutes. So this is the time to log any questions you still have at us. And after that, we will, if anybody would like to go up and have a look at the centre, the physical space of the centre, you would be very welcome if you haven't already been. As Jill mentioned, it's both, we have the potential for you to use it as a working space, if that would help you, or even as a space in which to hold part of, events. We're very up for that as well. So if you'd like to go and have a look at the centre, please do. But in the meantime, anybody got any last final questions that you'd like to throw at us, or comments? Any coming in, Lucy?
I have asked, we will see.
And I've got one just quickly. So I'm assuming that our expressions of interest were just sort of a very sort of broad brush look at things. How much can our application change from the EOI?
Totally. And so did last time. No, so that's why we had, sorry, the question was about how much the application can change between now and the full application. And the answer is as much as it needs to. That's why we have the mentoring phase, and we offer you mentors. Because, it was an idea, and all ideas need to be developed. So this is where you now start working with your mentor, if you've got one, or colleagues or whatever. And yes, it can change as much as you need it to change. Some changed quite a lot last year. Some shrank, some expanded, some didn't have a question and ended up with one. So yes, change it however you feel it needs to change.
And one follow-on question. With the feedback, if you don't get funded, would you recommend resubmission to another round in the future within your feedback?
Yes, we did that. So it's about can you resubmit? Yes, we have, I think off the top of my head, 2 or 3 expressions this time, which have developed from expressions of interest and feedback last time. So yes, absolutely. Lucy.
Our online audience would like to know if an early career researcher can be the lead applicant.
Jill, do you want to answer that one?
Yes, absolutely. Anybody can be a lead applicant.
Yeah, that's it. We're open, we're open to ideas. Anybody can be a lead applicant. Yes.
What's the idea behind the expression of interest, and will that be taken into account? I mean, how the expression of interest has evolved into what you're going to submit? Was it just
Jill can answer that one better than me because she was actually close to the task to decide.
Yeah, so
sorry, I need to repeat the question.
So yeah, so the question was why did we do the expression of interest, really? So so we did the expression of interest so that we could have these discussions early on and basically collaborate to develop the proposals and to give people the opportunity to that, especially people who were not used. We wanted to encourage people from outside of the university and they're not used to putting in grant applications generally, so that was the idea, to provide this opportunity for mentorship. Last year we made the mistake of saying you could have an EOA, but if you hadn't got an EOA, you could still apply. And so then we ended up with loads of people like a day before the final thing, then kind of coming up with new projects. And so we said, no, basically, by putting in an expression of interest, you have basically expressed an interest to apply for this round of funding. And now nobody else can. So if you didn't put an expression of interest, you have to wait 6 months. And that just means that we can spread our support for you equally and kind of fairly, rather than having someone just contact us the day before.
Yeah. Thank you, Jill. Yeah.
Philip. Hi. So can we book in to see our mentors to help with the projects?
Good question. Yeah, mentoring. Yeah, now is the time to start talking to your mentors. I will say that the academic PIs are very busy with an application round that we have going at the minute, a job application. So they are likely to be tied up with that for the next few days. But I would suggest that you now start, reflect on what you've heard here today, think about things, get in touch with your mentor and start the conversation as soon as you like. And depending on your mentor, it might be that you do it on the phone, you come in to see them, you do it by email, whichever way works for you. On Skype, I mean, people I'm mentoring, any of the above is fine. I don't mind how people, and I think that's true for most people, except that a couple of the mentors, Laura and Karen, are down in Cornwall. So if you've got them as your mentor and you happen to be in Cornwall, hurrah! If you haven't, it might be better to do it by email or phone. And financial questions, as I said earlier, talk to Lucy and Jill or stroke your college funding people. Lucy.
Are there any other resources available in terms of support for applications, discussion, refinement, in addition to the mentor?
Yeah, there's basically me. Yeah. I mean, although I am mentoring some people, if there's a question that you don't want to go to your mentor with, or your mentor's struggling a bit, they will come to me anyway. So if I'm very up for any quick email if anybody has anything that they want to ask me. Sorry, Jill, you had your hand up just now.
Yeah, just going back to the finance. So if you are within the university and you want the money essentially to be transferred to your college if you're successful, then you do need to go through your college finance, but your college finance really do need to talk to us as well. So yeah, because last time I had some things where they costed things that weren't actually eligible. So yeah, even if you are doing it through your college, get them to have a conversation with us as well.
Yeah. Are you guys on holiday in August?
I am away from the 4th to the 11th of August, but
I am
Lucy
not.
is here, so there will be
And
always
I'm-
someone in the
But
office.
there's someone available.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the question was about availability through August, and yes, there will always be someone answering that welcome centre email.
Absolutely.
So, yes. Any final, which brings me to my final point. The deadline for applications is the 7th of September. Close of play at end of the day on the 7th of September. And if you haven't had a copy of the application form, which most of you have, I think, drop an email to the Welcome Centre email and we'll make sure that you get one sent out to you and other information that we have. And then we will make our decision on the 26th of September. So successful people, sorry, Jill?
I'll just make a point about, yes, we've sent you that application because you have reserved the right to apply for this round, so please don't send it to other people who want to apply.
Yes.
Because we don't want any more than 55 applications. That's enough competition.
Just to back up what Jill said earlier, only people who have put in an expression of interest are eligible to put in the full application. If you didn't put in an expression of interest, we will be doing this again in 6 months' time, and you can have another bash.
And if you have changed your mind after today, that is also okay.
That is also, if you think, eek, I need a bit longer, you can take a bit longer. That happened last time. We had some people who said they weren't quite ready, and they're coming back this time because they gathered the people. Okay. Well, thank you all ever so much for coming. Thank you, Jill and Lucy. Jill is going to lead a delegation up the stairs if you want to have a look at the centre. But otherwise, thanks for coming. I will be staying here for the next 10 minutes or so. If you want to grab me. Thanks very much. Thanks, people.